Welcome back, everyone, to the Canadian Baseball Network podcast. We're very thankful and thrilled to welcome back the executive director and founder of ALS Double, Cherrie-Marie Chiu. Cherrie, how's it going?
Great. Thanks for having me back on.
Yeah, absolutely. So recently, it's September 6th, I believe,
Yes.
the Terriers and the Baseball Zone put on their charity baseball game in support of ALS Double. So tell me a little bit about that event and how that went. I believe it was the third annual. Is that correct?
It is like the Baseball Zone and the Terriers have done a really great job at helping us, raise awareness for ALS and really have these fun different events. So the first year they actually did kind of like a baseball carnival at the Baseball Zone. So people who attended got to do different things at the Baseball Zone. So they got to try out the batting cages, and they had fun little challenges for the kids to do throughout. And of course, there was food. And then last year, they had the very first coaches versus I think it was under 17s or under 16s play. And, of course, I rooted for the kids, but the coaches just blew them away. They blew them away last year, but this year was a totally different game. The kids really were hard to beat at the beginning, and but the coaches came back and they won again.
So
So
the coaches did end up winning, because that was going to be one of my
the
questions.
coaches did end up winning again. But hey, I mean, if the coaches didn't win, that's not good news for the kids in the program, right?
Yeah, it's probably bad news. Yeah, the program might not want to promote that part of it. But so was money raised during this event, or was it more of an awareness?
Yeah, they raised some. Okay, so last year, all of the money happened raised during the event. This year, they're sort of raising some money during the game, and then they're going to have other events throughout the year. And I believe they are planning on a golf tournament next spring.
Okay,
So they're hoping to bring in funds through all the different events.
How important is it to continuously involve youth in this push to raise awareness and funds for ALS? Because when you're young, you don't really think, you kind of think you're invincible to a certain degree. I don't think they're necessarily thinking about ALS and these types of diseases. So can you just kind of talk a little bit about how important it is to have the youth kind of involved in something like this?
For sure. I mean, I think it's important for kids to be involved in the community to begin with. It doesn't matter why, and no matter whether it's a disease or just something in your community. So to be involved in the community, I think, is number one, the most important thing. To learn about disease and what other people are going through is a whole other thing, which is amazing. Now, when my brother was diagnosed with ALS, he was 32 when he was originally officially diagnosed. He was 31 when he started feeling symptoms. That is very young for the disease, but not unheard of today, mostly because of technology. Technology has come a long way to help us understand disease, not just ALS, but all kinds of diseases. And I think as children, we definitely feel like we're invincible. And at 31, my brother fully felt invincible. He was playing every single sport. He was riding a motorcycle. He was living life. And not that that contributed to him having ALS, but I think that it stopped him in his tracks 100%, right? And if young people know more about the disease, know more about what is potentially out there that can affect them, I think that it helps to prevent. We've come a long way in ALS research in the last 50 years. And so we've learned about things like environmental factors that might potentially affect us, that might actually bring upon ALS, which we didn't know before. Now, these environmental factors can also bring any other disease, but knowing that in your youth makes you a little bit more aware of your choices that you're making as you're growing up, right? And I think for young people, that's a good thing to know. It's a good thing to know that not everybody lives the way they do, and that other people live differently, and we do live with disease.
Building on that a little bit, Cherrie, I wanted to ask you about developments in ALS research. You've done a great job on the ALS Double Instagram talking a little bit about that. Are there any developments in ALS research that you've kind of taken notice of recently that you'd like to share? Like, for example, you mentioned it on the Instagram, the findings from University of Toronto regarding C9orf72 certainly come to mind.
Yeah, I mean, it's really exciting today, all the different pieces of research that are coming out. Now, at ALS Double Play, we have and we are supporting research at the University of Toronto. And I just feel like when we were going through the disease as a family, I couldn't wrap my head around the fact that we could send people to the moon, but we couldn't figure out a disease like ALS. But now we understand that it's a brain disease. ALS is a brain disease, and the brain is super complicated. Now, C9orf72 is one of the very first genes that was discovered that was related to ALS, that along with TDP43. And both of those genes specifically affect familial or genetic ALS, which my brother did not have. We don't have any family history of ALS. But because we can understand what those two genes do in ALS and how they affect the brain, it goes a long way with potential treatment. Now, 50 years ago, we didn't know any genes that were related to or that affected ALS. Today, we know over 40 genes. Plus, we know hundreds of proteins that are involved also in ALS and that are affecting our brain. This goes so far. Today, we also have 81 clinical trials around the world with over 7,000 people participating in them. When my brother had ALS just over 10 years ago, there were maybe 10 or 20. So that's how much we've advanced in research, even in the last 10 years. So for me, it's like super important, especially with this disease that is still fatal, that still has no real effective treatment, to be supportive of ALS research.
Speak a little bit about those clinical trials. What exactly goes on in some of those, and what's sort of kind of been found, or what's trying to be found out of those?
So, what is really interesting and what we've found in the past few years about ALS is that I have mentioned that it's complicated, and it's complicated because there's so many different ways ALS can happen. It's not always just one gene, it could be two genes. And so, when we have these different clinical trials, what they're trying to do is they're trying different pathways to try and stop the disease. So there are clinical trials for drugs that are trying to stop the whatever protein or gene is mismanaged or misfiring. And then there are also treatments that are trying to manage symptoms. Obviously, we prefer the ones that are trying to stop the disease. We haven't yet found one that is exactly doing that, but there's a lot of hope in the understanding of these potential treatments. So even I recently did a podcast or a taping on a, a potential treatment that didn't work in the clinical trial, and it was scrapped. But what the researchers were able to do was go back and look at what went wrong and figure out how they can tweak it for the future to move forward. And, just looking at how people reacted to it, what changed and what didn't for them. And so even in the failures of drug trials, there's still light because they're still learning from it, and there's still a way forward from there.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting how you tie that into sport. It's all about making adjustments and learning from
Yes.
failures and that sort of thing. Obviously, on a much more important level, we're talking about a game and baseball that we all love, but ALS is obviously a lot more serious. But I do understand there's an event coming up next week. Exhale for Hope. Just talk a little bit about that. That was a mouthful for me for some reason. Talk a little bit about that event.
Yes, Exhale Hope for ALS is a yoga event, and we actually hold it at a winery in Stouffville. So people often perk up when I tell them it's at a winery, and there is wine involved. But I think the reason why I thought about yoga and ALS to begin with is because when my brother was first diagnosed with ALS, we looked to meditation and yoga to help. Because as you can imagine, being diagnosed with a fatal disease, your mind is going to run wild. And the yoga studio that I was attending, just by chance was starting a meditation clinic. And so we joined it, and it was really good for him, I think, to learn how to quiet his mind, because we weren't going to get rid of the disease, right? But we needed to learn how to live with it. And I think it was helpful for both of us. So having this yoga event, and for me too, the other thing was as ALS progressed in my brother, and he was no longer able to do things. As I mentioned, he was playing every sport, and now no longer able to do that. He couldn't swing a bat or a golf club without falling over. I just thought, if I can move my body in any which way, I'm going to continue to do that because I'm able to, and I'm going to do that for my brother. And these events, while they are fun, we also take that moment to remind people that we are there for a cause, and we are there for specific people, because these events are amazing in that a lot of people who have gone through the disease with loved ones often attend, and there is this really wonderful support system and this camaraderie that you feel like you are a team and that you're helping each other through as we move forward in our lives without our loved ones.
That kind of gets to my next point is someone that's been through it and it's touched you obviously very personally with your brother. What's your advice to people that are going through it, whether it's the person experiencing ALS or the family that it obviously affects greatly? What would you say to them to help kind of make their journey a little easier?
Yeah, you're right. I mean, the person who gets diagnosed with the disease actually has the disease, but the entire family lives with the disease, because there's no way that that one person can live without the help of their family and friends. And so I think my number one piece of advice would be to reach out to someone, to talk to them. And I mean, at ALS Double Play, we've built this amazing community of people who have lived through the disease, who are willing to talk to others about the disease. Now, I know I was just talking to a good friend who also lost a loved one to ALS. And, I was saying to her, we are in a totally different space today than the people who are going through ALS today. The people who are going through ALS today have a totally different perspective on the disease. And it's so hard for them, because when you are living with someone, whether with the disease or with someone who has the disease, it almost feels like you have no time for yourself. But it's so important as a caregiver, as a family caregiver, as someone who is not paid and is, trying to probably work full time still to help the family income, is to take that moment for yourself, because you cannot help your loved one unless you're taking care of yourself. You really need that time. And if it's a moment to talk to someone who has been through it and who understands what you're going through, reach out, because we are so willing to talk about the experience, what we did, how we've lived through it, and I'm sure there's all kinds of things, caregiver guilt, all kinds.
Is there any strategies that you use specifically, or things that you like to do to kind of, as a bit of an escape? Because baseball can be that, right? I mean, you
Oh
always
my
sit
goodness,
two and a
yes.
half hour, 3 hour baseball game. I
Yes.
find myself, I don't think about anything but watching the game on the field. So were there anything like that you kind of did to give yourself a little bit of a mental break from the constant of it?
Yeah, for sure. When my brother was sick, as I mentioned, he played all sports, but he loved all sports. We grew up with baseball. We grew up playing baseball. We grew up watching baseball. If we weren't watching it, my dad was listening to it on the radio. It was all the time. So, watching these sports with your loved ones, or whatever it is that they like to do, if you can watch the sport with them or watch whatever it is that they like to do, it's a beautiful escape, because you can talk about it with each other like you're regular people. Nothing's wrong. We talked about baseball all the time, basketball. We watched tennis, golf, any sport we watched. But of course, also we loved baseball. So, and it's amazing because they're on every single day, right? We can watch baseball every day and have something to look forward to, and have something that will take our minds off the disease.
wanted to ask you a little bit about kind of what's next for ALS research. What are you kind of looking ahead to in the coming years for further progress on working towards finding a cure, and maybe sort of a positive note, like what excites you maybe about the future?
I think what excites me the most about ALS research is the more we find out, the more we have different avenues to kind of treat the disease. So, as I mentioned before, ALS is very complicated. And so that means that there's not just one avenue for fixing the disease or for making things better. You know, you can't take an Advil and for it to go away. There are multiple ways to try and treat the disease. So I think that's exciting. I think the fact that we could very much personalize medication. So we're looking at, because we're not looking at just one avenue, my medication that works for me might not be the same as yours. And in that same respect, we might be able to stack medication. So if multiple things are happening, which does happen with ALS, you can treat multiple things at the same time. Again, very specific medication and treatment versus just something overall, hoping that that's going to fix things. And I think that's the most exciting thing. And the other one more exciting thing is technology, AI. That has made things so much faster for people in the lab. When I talk to my friends at U of T in the lab, they like latched onto AI a long time ago, way before I, was comfortable trying to use it. And they said, because if you don't try it when it comes out, if you don't go with it then, you'll get left behind and you won't understand how to use it. And you can use it to save you time so you can focus on something else. And I think that's really exciting. And that's the most exciting thing for the future of any disease is technology and artificial intelligence to help us move further and faster.
Yeah, AI is not always a scary thing. Sometimes I think
No.
of it, I'm like, oh my God, it's scary. But you talk about doctors and technology and medicine and all the great things that can help with. Obviously, the end goal here is to find a cure for ALS, whether that's tomorrow or years down the line. But for you personally, through ALS Double Play, what role do you hope to play in helping get there?
What role? I've not really thought about that specifically. I mean, our catchphrase at ALS Double Play is to make ALS history. And so I would love for ALS Double Play to be part of making ALS history. Whether it's we get rid of it, whether we make it a livable disease, whether we're part of some amazing finding that changes the course of ALS, all those things would be exciting to me.
Absolutely. I feel like every time we talk, I think this is the second or third time we've talked, there's been advancements in something along the way. So it's definitely exciting. If people want to get involved or donate, you can go to alsdoubleplay.com. It's on the bottom of the screen there. Cherrie, thank you so much for taking the time to talk to us about this and doing all the great work that you're doing.
Thank you so much.